She went back to Montana.
Yeah.
Amy Clement.
She wasn't very long, really.
She had a baby, I think.
Yeah, worked for her. She worked.
So Leslie, can you hear me?
Yes,
You're the president in Silver City, right?
I am.
So the fact that you all gathered at the same location and you're going to do that again on Thursday?
We are. We're going to be at Peter Fowley, our immediate past president's house, on Thursday.
So because you are gathering together, but then you're also part of this larger Rio Grande Academy gathering, that does not count as two separate makeups.
Fine.
You don't.
Spoken as a true membership chair.
That's really motivational. Oh, excuse me.
All right, it is 20 till the hour. I do have to remember to say that, especially if we have our friends from other districts joining us. For those of you who are new to this, distance learning with what we call the Rio Grande Academy is something that a number of other districts are looking at. When I found out about that, I was excited because that meant that we may not have to figure this out ourselves, which is true to some degree, but what we discovered is that we were a little bit further along. So folks from these other districts, like the folks we have on tonight, and we're very grateful for them joining us, are observing us to kind of get some ideas, what works well, what doesn't. And there's about, Diana, correct me if I'm wrong, there's maybe 6 or 7 districts that are at least part of the little coalition that we're a part of looking at this. There may be others, but there's about 6 or 7 that seem to be kind of spearheading this.
Yeah, there are 2 in the United States, 1 in New Zealand, which covers part of the Pacific, 1 in Japan, our district, which covers the Caribbean. I'm not sure about Canada. I'm not sure. But anyway, it is the breadth of the world. But we're all covering the same curriculum, but it's up to us how we cover it. Ours is taking a slightly different format from yours. We're using Zoom, but we're dividing it up a little differently. So everyone has, freedom to try what they want to try, and then the feedback will go back to a central committee, and they will decide whether or not this will remain simply a pilot or whether it will progress to actually be involved in part of the RLI program. But we're all very grateful to Jeff, because it's tough being the first one. He's had to do really the lion's share of all the research and the thinking, and it's been enormously helpful to us. So I thank you all, because and also for being so inclusive. It's been really great.
Oh, thank you. And Bill, we can see your smiley face. So welcome to the video side. Bill?
Yes, Bill. We did a minute ago, but not now.
Interesting. Okay.
That's just a photo of Bill.
It's a photo of Bill. Okay, well, it's still a very nice photo.
That's Bruce.
That's Bruce.
Okay. We are going to look at ethics and vocational service. This is the last session for tonight. Again, I want to start with this this sentence below the title, just to kind of focus us. I am ethical, recognize and promote ethics in others, and seek opportunities to serve through my vocation. That's a compound sentence with 2 ands in it, which is not quite as simple as the other one, which had just one statement, but there's a lot in there. And we'll get into all aspects of that. Session goals: how should the guiding principles of Rotary strengthen me in my vocation? We're going to spend a lot of time looking at the guiding principles, including the object of Rotary, which Cheryl kindly passed on to me for this session. How can Rotarians promote the four-way test in their community and professional life in all stages of life? How can I promote Rotary and Rotary ideals within my vocation? And how do I make my vocation useful to Rotary? So what's interesting about this module is that it covers two topics that are intrinsically linked, and we're going to look at both of them. We're going to look at vocational service as one of the 5 avenues of service, and we're going to look at high ethical standards and look at the connections between the two. When I took Rio Grande Academy, the first year it was offered, when Bruce was leading our effort in the district, this was one of those sessions that was a bit of a head scratcher to me. I was fairly new to Rotary. And the other avenues of service made total sense. I could understand why we're doing service projects. I could understand why we have fellowship with each other. I can understand why there's an emphasis on youth. But the vocational service took a little longer for me to fully digest. And I do believe that it's maybe the one avenue of service that we don't put as much attention into, or one that sometimes gets overlooked more so than the others. When you talk to people about Rotary, this may not be the one that comes up first, but it is an important one. So, okay. So we're going to start with the notion of classifications. And Bruce is a member of my club. I think the club initially wanted me to have a classification of nudnik. But I don't know whether nudnik was an official Rotary classification, so they came up with something else. But before we get into the vocational service avenue of service, we should talk about classification first, because that's really where this came from. So what are classifications and why are they important in our clubs? Bill?
This is Peter. It makes the clubs more well-rounded.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, especially relating to our jobs, right? But yes, absolutely. So diversity.
Didn't Rotary years ago only allowed one classification in a particular club?
That is correct.
Yep.
That is correct. And, you know, it's interesting. We still think of classifications as a way to promote and develop diversity, but we're not quite as stringent as saying we can only have one of, although we still have to come up with some interesting titles for classifications, because we don't want to have, you know, a number of people that have the same title. But diversity is really important. And if you've heard in the last year or so, Rotary International's focus on membership, diversity is still a big part of that adds to the health and the vibrancy of the club. So classifications kind of give us that information. What else is the value of having different classifications in a club?
Going to bring together different sets of skills with different classifications.
Yes, I think I heard most of it, but you said a set of skills?
Yeah,
Different
different
sets of
set of skills.
So where would that be important in terms of what we're trying to do at the club level?
Well, you need promoters, and you need, you know, computer people. You need bankers. You need accountants. You need all kinds of things to really run an effective club. I mean, there's many aspects. In effect, it's a small business.
Right. And if we're involved in particular service projects and we need certain skill sets, we can draw on our membership to help us with that. And of course, if we don't have that skill set, that's often a reason to partner with another club that may have the particular skill set that we need. Anything else about classifications, Bill? And you know, Albuquerque Club has so many people. I'm sure that classifications come up sometimes. How does it work at a large club like the Albuquerque Club?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Finally, we have a classification committee that meets, and when we get applications, we look at their skill sets and what they might bring to the club and so forth, and then we assign them a classification, coordinate with them to see that it fits. And like you say, classifications brings a lot of different types of expertise to the clubs. It brings a lot of contacts within the community and so forth. So we look at it as a very good part of the networking and contributions from the community back to the club, so we can use those resources.
Excellent. Rick, what about in grants? So what types of vocations are there in grants that reflect the membership in your club?
We have the medical fields. We have, meaning our center, I'm administrator for a skilled nursing facility, and the hospital, the clinics, we have doctors. We also have the service center. We have a lot of the nonprofits in the community, like the Chamber of Commerce, Grants Main Street, Futures Foundation, that represents the youth of the community. So we really have kind of a full spectrum.
That's great. That's great. What about in Silver City? Good diversity of vocations there?
I would say so. No better than I do.
It goes up and down. You know, we go, we've been bigger at sometimes. When we shrink, we have fewer classifications, of course. I feel like there's always room for more diversity than we have now, although we're doing pretty well in that regard. We tend to have clumps around banking and the university. But we have in the past had a commercial airline pilot, you know, and we have someone from the mine finally, which is nice. It's a work in progress, always, I think.
Yeah. And especially in a community like Grants and Silver City, where you're kind of in a bit of an island. There's not like little communities around that have,
Right.
So the kind of the fact that you're a little bit off the beaten path makes it a little bit more challenging to get that kind of diversity.
Yes.
We have a small population base to deal with too.
That's right. That's right.
And I think it's important that we allow now more than just one from each classification, because want to involve people in Rotary that have the same ideals you do, and you would hate to not involve someone for that reason.
Right. Now, Elaine and Jim, you're in Las Cruces, is that right?
Yes.
So larger area, probably more opportunities for vocational diversity.
Yes, but I think it's like Silver City mentioned, we're in a small club. We have about 40 members, and it kind of goes up and down as far as we may have a big.
I can't hear you now.
I can't either.
Number of universities. They're in different areas, but a lot of bankers. And so it's a continuous thing, I think, to get the diversity and work on the diversity.
Got it. We had like a momentary blip there. That might have just been a Zoom issue. So, okay. What I'm going to do now is bring up this very nice attachment that we have in this module. So, and this is one we're going to spend quite a bit of time looking at. So these are the guiding principles of Rotary. Some of them we are intimately familiar with. Some of them we don't reinforce as often as perhaps we should. Here on the right, we have the 5 avenues of service, which Cheryl walked us through, and here's the vocational service one. And you'll notice that in the description of vocational service, it specifically talks about practicing high ethical standards. So it's beyond serving each other through vocations, like we were talking about before. If we're working on a project or we need a certain skill set, but then it introduces this notion of high ethical standards, which we're going to talk about. Look at the object of Rotary. So this is on the top left here. And I don't, to me, if someone were to ask me, what is this really describing? I would almost view the object of Rotary as almost like a purpose in 4 kind of discrete statements. I mean, it's not ideal, but it feels like a purpose to me. But whatever it is, it's the object of Rotary, and you'll notice that there's 4 of them: to encourage and foster, and there's 4 pieces to that. Where in the object of Rotary do you see this notion about vocation and or high ethical standards? Where does it show up in the objects of Rotary?
Number 2.
Number 2. By the way, I am testing, since these are pilots, I'm testing these little draw tools just to see how poorly I do. But yeah, so that second one certainly has notions of high ethical standards in business and professions. And we're going to talk about useful occupations in a few minutes. I always find that an interesting term. In fact, I'm still waiting to approach someone and say, we'd love to have you in Rotary, but you're not in a useful occupation. We're really sorry. What else? Any other place in the object of Rotary where the notion of vocational service or high ethical standards shows up? Let me clear this. Any other places where it kind of shows up?
The 4th.
The 4th. Right. Again, it talks about business and profession in terms of world fellowship. So yes, it shows up in the 4th. I would say it also shows up in the 3rd when it talks about ideal of service in our business life. I'm sorry, go ahead.
To me, that's the ethics, not only, the ideal of service.
Right. I think what's interesting about this whole notion of vocational service and ethics is it's kind of 2-way. So we're looking at how to bring these high ethical standards and the 4-way test into our vocational lives. And it's also, as we talked about earlier, how we take our skills from our vocations and bring it to Rotary. So it's almost like a synergistic relationship, if that makes sense. And if you can see, I'm going like this. You can see
Yeah.
So there's quite a bit in the object of Rotary that talks about, vocations and ethical standards. Let's scroll down a little bit further. Here's the 4-way test and the Rotary Code of Conduct. So do we all agree that high ethical standards are embedded in the 4-way test? That's a pretty obvious one, right?
Yeah.
What about the Rotary Code of Conduct? Again, that's another one that sometimes we don't think about too often. What do we see in the Rotary Code of Conduct?
Number 1.
I heard one.
Yes, number 1, act with integrity.
Everyone.
Yeah, everyone.
There's a little bit in everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting, I think, is if you agree with me, and you may not, that vocational service sometimes does not get the same level of attention as service projects and raising money for the foundation and membership and these other things. And yet in the guidelines, the guidance, the guiding principles of Rotary, there's more language in these 4 boxes about vocation and high ethical standards than anything else.
Yeah.
So it's all throughout this page. And yet it doesn't get the same level of attention, at least to me. So any other thoughts or insights about the guiding principles and how important they are regarding vocational service?
I want to say one thing, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
I mentioned before that Elaine and I were involved in Sister Cities.
Yes.
And one of the strongest weaknesses, if you can phrase it that way, Sister Cities, and one of the strengths of Rotary is this notion of classifications and vocational, the view toward vocation. And I think that the classifications were missing there, and they didn't get the diversity of talent and personality that we get in Rotary. And I think that is in large part, a lot of the reason that this is much more successful.
I've heard a number of people, when asked, why Rotary as opposed to other opportunities to volunteer your time, and a lot of times they'll bring that up. Ethics, integrity, values, and maybe that is something that really is at our core, even if we don't reinforce it as often as we could. But maybe that is something that kind of gives us a little bit of a different feel to people than other service organizations that are much more focused on the service than on the ethics and the integrity.
And I think vocations do provide a diversity that other organizations can completely miss, because it does give them that opportunity to get very cliquish. And then they're one-sided.
Any other insights on the guiding principles of Rotary that we just went over and how that aligns with vocational service? I found that striking. Here's all this language about ethics and vocational service. It's very comforting too. Let's talk a little bit more about ethical standards and ethical behavior, since that is part of vocational service. So I'm going to share a little notepad here. I'm going to ask my partner in crime, Cheryl, if she would take some notes here. So in your own experiences, again, it can be within Rotary, it can be in your personal life, your professional life. What are some examples or maybe some things that would demonstrate high ethical standards? What types of things would we see that suggest or reflect high ethical standards?
Well, this is Rick. To use an example of a phrase is to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Absolutely.
I remember once a colleague of mine being shocked when I declined to take a client because I didn't feel I was the one who would do the best job.
Do you get paid for doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So something about
you're a lawyer, right?
what?
You are a lawyer?
Not at the time. I'm a business consultant.
But you were a lawyer, or you are a lawyer?
I was a business consultant at the time.
Okay, got it.
But there are lawyers with high ethical standards, believe it or not.
Yes, but I can imagine where lawyers sometimes struggle taking a client who, let's say, they know that they were in the wrong, and yet they still have to do their best job of making a case before the judge or the jury, because that's their job, and yet they kind of have to do that. I mean, I can see where that could be a struggle.
You kind of have to believe in the right of everyone to have a voice. And
yep.
It wasn't it. No, never mind. We digress. So something about actions consistent with values, even when it's not in your best interest, or something, even when it's not a benefit to you personally.
Yes.
I'm going to ask Elaine to help me with this one, but see if I can remember a piece of it. And it was a presentation, a very brief presentation by a veterinarian in our club who was assigned the task of going into Mexico to check out cattle that might need to be slaughtered because of the disease, whatever it was that was coming into the country, and they did not want to have sick cattle coming in. And when he met the ranch owner in Mexico, he was wearing his Rotary pin. And the rancher was also Rotarian, and he knew immediately that he would be treated fairly. And he said it made all the difference in the world in that particular very tough
Great.
task that had to be done.
I think we had talked before, maybe it was during Cheryl's session, that there is a tendency for us, let's say when we're on travel and something happens, we find out if there's a local Rotarian that has a business there, and we just go there probably with the same assumption that you just referred to. We're going to get a good ethical deal. We're going to be able to deal with people that will treat me with respect. And there's a comfort level with Rotarians, even if we've never met them, because we all have this in common.
We're comrades.
We're comrades, yes. Bill, what about you?
Well, I've been an aviator all my life. I had a health issue, and now I'm in the tax business. So I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, integrity, honestly, you've got an IRS code that needs to be followed, but, you know, I'm not an agent for the IRS. So I try to treat people honestly, let them know what the law is and so forth. And if folks want to go outside the law, I have to tell them they're headed in that direction. If they continue to insist, I need to release them.
Yep. Recommend
someone else or whatever. But I think part of the integrity is and honesty is in supporting clients. And if there's gray areas, I tend to deal with the individual above the IRS. So it's a conflict to me all the time. The simple tax cases are very easy to take care of. We get a lot of cities involved. I have to look at my own integrity, what the law says, and how to handle all of that. So,
just out of curiosity, the first sentence in the four-way, well, in the description of the four-way test in your guide, it says, from the earliest days of the organization, Rotarians were concerned with promoting high ethical standards in their professional lives. And then it talks about the four-way test. I'm curious if you find that the four-way test is equally applicable in your personal lives.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Can you provide an example without mentioning names where the four-way test, let's say, was helpful to you in your personal life?
Well, in my
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, in my area of work, one of the big things that I deal with on a constant basis is with residents and with HR matters for staff. And so it really has to be an honest investigation and really fair to everyone involved in it for a positive outcome.
Another example?
This is Elaine. And I think in my personal life, the experience is, if I'm not honest and telling the truth today, are you going to trust me tomorrow?
That's right.
And the answer is no. You know, so if I am not straightforward, if I'm not honest in dealing with personal matters, then it reflects on who I am in my core.
Yeah. You know, even though we're talking about vocational service and high ethical standards, I'm very thankful that when we recite the four-way test, it doesn't say of the things we think, say, or do in our business lives only. And, you know, I've been in some very interesting philosophical discussions about the power of the four-way test. And we're going to talk in a minute about kind of how we reinforce that in our businesses. But some of those questions, like, is it the truth, typically has an answer that's not, that there's not a lot of gray. But some of them, like, is it fair to all concerned? When the first time I saw that, I thought, wow, all? It means I've got to think about every single person that's impacted by a decision. That's sometimes a little bit harder to kind of reconcile and feel comfortable with. I don't know about your experience, but these are not necessarily easy questions. So, okay.
Jeff?
Yes, sir.
You bring up a point, Jeff, because talking about the leadership roles, it's not always going to be fair to everybody, or it's not always going to be beneficial to everybody. And those are things you have to balance as a club leader.
That's exactly right. And I am continually reminded that fair and equal are not the same. If it were equal, it may be easier to answer, but maybe harder to do. But fair and equal are not the same, and there are times when we just have to make our best judgment. I appreciate, and I've had occasions with Bruce and other members of my club to have a real open four-way test discussion. There's been times when I've wrestled with something, and I'll look at the four-way test, I'll try to go through it, I'll struggle with one of the questions, and then I'll bring someone who knows me and knows the situation in, and over lunch say, so how does this feel to you? You know, if we both agree that we're not breaking any part of the four-way test, I'll feel better than if it's just me because I'm kind of struggling with some of this. So I found it to be helpful at times to have a discussion with other people in Rotary if there's aspects of the four-way test in a particular situation that is a struggle. So it is good to remind ourselves, which gets us to the next topic. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. We'll get back to our regular view. By the way, for those of you who have not used Zoom before, how is this working for you? Is it fairly easy? Do you like it? Thumbs up?
Thumbs down for me. That's Bill.
I'm sorry, Bill. I am sorry, but we will figure out between now and...
Stick your finger in front of the camera.
Well, I like the idea of seeing everybody, and it's a good format.
Good, thank you. So one of the things we want to talk about is knowing that we've got this two-way connection between high ethical standards and our vocational, our jobs and our careers. How do we reinforce, whether it be the high ethical standards or the four-way test, how do we reinforce them in our jobs? Any thoughts?
To me, one easy way is to treat other people how you would like to be treated. Because when you look at the aspects of the four-way test, you would want someone to extend those courtesies, if you will, to you. And so you would try to embody those in your practice.
Absolutely. And what do you do for a living?
I am a banker.
Excellent. Any other thoughts? How do we reinforce this? How do we let people know, whether they're fellow employees or our customers, how important this is to us?
Well, for sure, one easy way is to post the four-way test and the objects of Rotary somewhere prominent where people who interact with us can see them. I think Walgreens does that, don't they?
Yes.
And along with that, to share when appropriate, that this is a foundation for decision making that tends to lead both the thinking and the discussion to a better result.
Absolutely. And I think that's also part of that, why we have a tendency, whether we think about it or not, to be attracted to businesses with Rotarians in it, because we do have that expectation.
Exactly.
Any other thoughts, Rick?
Well, just again, by walking the walk, talking the talk, living by example. So if you expect other people to speak the truth and to treat everyone fairly and making sure it's beneficial and fair to all concerned, you have to do the same thing. And it doesn't matter if they're subordinates, peers, or superiors, because if they see you living by those standards, then it would encourage them to do the same thing.
I am curious, just because we have a larger group tonight than we had last night. And again, obviously without mentioning names, but have any of you been involved in a situation in your club where a member violated the four-way test, either within Rotary or in their personal or professional life? And if so, how was that handled? I'm just curious. Hopefully the answer is no, but sometimes things happen. So any example from your experience where there was a kind of a four-way test violation?
I'm not aware of any in grants.
We did
That in the coin too. Several.
I'm hearing laughing, but that doesn't mean there was a yes.
Right. We were
I was
identifying the situation.
years ago when I was involved in the Denning Club, and there was a very serious violation of the four-way test. Our treasurer embezzled the majority of the club's funds, and it took years for them to recover. And it came from, how things are. No one wants to be the secretary treasurer, not having maybe as good of auditing procedures in place. But the person, of course, was wonderful, friendly. Everyone trusted that person, sweet person, and desperate times or desperate actions in someone's life can sometimes make people do desperate things, and that's what happened.
Wow. Oh, so I'm sorry to hear that. That must have just been hard for the membership.
It was absolutely terrible. And more than the membership, it was hard in the community because once it was known, and you try to keep things under wraps, but that doesn't usually happen in real life. Yeah. And it was very hard publicly for the club for quite a while. They have since recovered and are doing famously, but it was very hard for a few years.
One of the things that we talk about when we get to the public relations module in Rio Grande Academy is that typically when we're getting the word out, it's often a positive word. We're doing good things. But occasionally something gets out that's not good, whether it came from us or the press got a hold of it. And as much time and energy as it takes to build up a positive brand, it can take one event to shatter that. And as you pointed out, it may take years to recover. you just have to go about doing that. But one event can really affect the reputation and the whole dynamics of the club.
Yeah, true.
Okay. We have a couple minutes left, and I promised that I was going to get to this useful occupations question because I just find that so interesting. So why do we refer to, in the object of Rotary, useful occupations, and what does that suggest or mean? Why do we even use that term?
Well, Jeff, I have a thought about it. I hear that as a reminder that all occupations are useful. Is that people who are sweeping the streets have something to contribute to society.
So I agree with you, although you could argue, why even have the word then? You could say, worthiness of all occupations, but yet it's the word useful is in there for some reason. I agree with you, all occupations are useful, but I do find it interesting that they go so far as to actually insert that word.
And do you not think it's to underscore or remind us that we are to look at all occupations that way?
I do, but I also think of usefulness in terms of, and it was brought up earlier, we have a need for something. Who in the club is in an occupation that would be useful for accomplishing something that we want to do? Boy, we could really use a lawyer here to help us with something. So
why we don't leave, we're recognize and promote the value of all occupations.
Right.
And find a way to allow them to contribute to what we're up to?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give them an opportunity.
All without using that word.
Right. I find it an interesting word. As I said, when I first saw that, I thought, gee, what's an occupation that's not useful?
Right.
But there are occasions.
All are.
Right. So there are occasions when, well, let's put it this way. All Rotarians are valuable. And in some cases, certain Rotarians will be valuable because we have a particular need that their vocation brings to the table. Maybe that's a better way of saying it, right?
Okay.
Yeah. A drug smuggler is not a useful.
Right.
Right. No, it might not be a one. Okay, yes.
We don't want any drug dealers like they have in Breaking Bad.
Right. But it does bring to mind, and again, this is not necessarily something that's brought up in the materials, but oftentimes membership committees will be thinking about recruitment strategies and will think about vocations, especially vocations that are currently not in the club. So they'll use, let's say, a classification survey or something like that and say, what are we missing here? What's a skill set or a vocation that we don't have? And it's not like we're going to only look at that, but maybe in terms of our strategy, we'll think a little bit more about people in that vocation, because as long as they fit all the other criteria, they're also bringing something to us that we currently don't have. Have there been situations in your clubs where there's been members coming in that not necessarily entirely, but part of the appeal was a particular vocation that they were in that was attractive to the club?
Yeah.
Silver City, you're going like this. So what was your example?
Well, graphic designer and webmaster.
Yes. Yes. Especially now with all the challenges of getting the word out, to have people that are in social media and the intranet and
Yeah.
Definitely.
21st century technology. You know, Rotary is trying to get into the 21st century, so
Yeah.
absolutely. Bill, given the size of the Albuquerque Club, and given that you all have your vocational or your classification committee, have there been instances where there's been membership recruitment that at least put some emphasis on vocation?
Sure, and I think it's just another tool to use out there in the community is all it is. I mean, we don't just say we're going after these types of members or from this occupation or vocation and only look for them, but it is a tool for people to think about and membership to think about, and you know, again, propel them to maybe ask someone they hadn't thought about before.
Cheryl, what about, now you're in the large Santa Fe Club, correct?
Yes.
So what about the Santa Fe Club and kind of the vocation? I mean, do you have people, because Santa Fe is where the state government is, do you have a number of people that either are contractors or work in state government, and is that a useful occupation?
We do, but not as many as you might think. But one of the things that we did I thought was really interesting in our vocational service committee is just recently we asked 3 questions. I can't remember them now, but it was, what is your profession, or was your profession before you were retired, if you're retired? What kind of skills do you bring from that profession to the club? And we've developed a skills bank so we can go to, we're going to put it online for our other club members to see. So if they, in their own business or in their, daily life, if they need someone with those skills, they can look at that skills bank and think, maybe I could have a conversation with this other individual and see if there's something we could do to enhance, our own business, our own lifestyle. So it's really been interesting. Everybody participated. Just about everybody participated, and it was amazing some of the skills people had that even were outside their profession. So
if you need a nudnik, let me know.
My favorite nudnik.
Well, we are winding down to the end of this session. Any other thoughts or comments? Again, this to me is one of the more interesting modules in Rio Grande Academy, just because it's not something that we think about often. So there are a lot of things to consider, and tying back to how Rotary started and all of that. So any other questions or insights? Diana, Bruce, others who are on mute, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Bo.
I'm unmute myself there. I got Diane go first if she's ready.
Well, no, I think this has been a really, the way you've handled this has been a great discussion. I really enjoyed listening to everyone's point of view here, because it always seems to me to evoke different comments every single time. You can run this session as many times as you like, but it evokes always different comments. So I think it's been really excellent. Very much so. My brain is not functioning quite as well as it should. It's gone 3 o'clock in the morning, so I'm not as intelligent as I usually am.
Well, we sincerely appreciate everyone's participation. These sessions are recorded, and I will be sending out a link tomorrow. We're posting on YouTube right now. That seems to be a little bit easier than the other platforms we have tried. So I will send out a link. And for Diana, I'll send it to you if you can forward it to your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And before we close, Bill, since you registered late, are you going to be attending Wednesday night or Thursday night for the second half?
It'll be Wednesday night.
So tomorrow night. Okay, so I will put you in for tomorrow night. And tomorrow and Thursday, we will remind you that you're going to fill out the online survey, because since we're doing this online, I cannot hand you a sheet of paper for you to fill out and let us know how we did with the Rio Grande Academy. So instead, we're going to use an online survey. Again, that'll just be a trial balloon. We'll see how that works. So we'll make sure everyone has the link to that tomorrow and Thursday. Anything else before we close? If not, again, I want to thank everyone. I also want to thank my partner in crime, Cheryl, for doing such an outstanding job. And we will see you tomorrow or Thursday.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Yeah.